About 2 years ago, we had serious economic problems. My parents lost their job almost at the same time, and we lost the house we were paying for. We really had nowhere to go. We spent a few days with a friend of my father, but we were very uncomfortable. He and his family had just moved to a house, a girl, because his older daughter had married, but it was a great gesture on his part to welcome us for a few weeks. My parents went out every day to look for work, and since I was on vacation, I went out to walk a great part of the time so as not to bother our hosts. In one of those walks, a house called my attention almost at the end of the street. It was next to a small path that led to a ravine, a long slope of about 200 meters until reaching the street below. At some point I went up there, and when I got to the top, I saw her. I asked Lalo, the son of my father's friend, who lived there, because she looked abandoned, but there was something unusual about her. He told me that he didn't know well what was going on with that house, but it also caught his attention. That afternoon we went to see her. There was nothing strange, actually. It was just a house that seemed to have been abandoned by its inhabitants overnight. I told my parents about it, and our situation was so extreme that, in a burst of despair, I told them that we were going to live in that house. It was the same to be in a house without services as to live in the favor of someone else, and our intention was always to be there for just a few days. After a few hours I managed to convince them, first my mom and then my dad, and the next day we were already in that house. To our surprise, even the electricity was used. I know it sounds weird to do that, but I'm not ashamed to say it. They were desperate measures for a situation, in reality, extreme. We didn't stay there for a week. The first 2 days, my mom and I worked hard to clean the rooms. We didn't change anything, of course. We knew that the house wasn't ours, that its owners could come back. And in less than 2 days, we made it cozy. Of course, we only took what was necessary. The second night we spent there, I saw a lady standing in front of the door of one of the rooms. I yelled to my parents that someone had arrived, but we searched the whole house and we found absolutely no one. We went to sleep thinking that it had been nothing, or trying to think that. The next morning my dad got up to go to his friend's house to take a bath. It was very, very early, not even dawn, and someone pushed him out of the room. They pushed him so hard that he hit his head. And seriously, it was a very small house. No one could have been hiding from us. We saw a lady several times. On the third night, I came out of the bathroom when I saw my mom preparing food in the distance and an old lady right behind her. Before I could shout at her, the lady walked away or disappeared. The point is that I lost sight of her. My mom, in fact, was the one who saw her the least, but she also had experiences. One night we were all three pushed from our beds, all three at the same time. After that we slept together and tried to stop thinking about everything that was happening. We didn't want to go back to my friend's house, because who would believe what was happening to us here? My dad came up with an excuse for me to stay with them and leave this house, but I know they were wrong the next few nights, although they never wanted to tell me what happened to them the days I was gone. It was the 6th day they were in the house when I got up and walked it, bringing my parents some breakfast I prepared. Before I arrived, a lady approached me and told me that we shouldn't be there. I apologized and tried to explain that it was only for a few days, a great emergency, that we wouldn't cause any damage or try to take over the house, and she told me it wasn't about that. She told me that something had happened in that house. A pair of elderly people lived there with their son who had a mental illness. He was always a child of about 8 years old, even though his body was already that of an adult. Not long ago, the young man died and the elderly entered into a terrible depression. The woman who was telling me the story told me that she spoke a lot with the old woman, although they were not great friends. A week after the death of the son, a week later, the lady left her house for the first time. She approached the neighbor and showed her something that she was praying had passed. The night before, the old woman and her husband were on the verge of collapse, on the verge of dying of sadness. They would give whatever it was if death returned their son. The old woman said, in a mixture of emotion and fear, that the night before they heard someone walking down the patio. They looked out the window and saw a shadow walking among the trees. They dressed to go out, and when they opened the door there was he, his son, with his clothes full of dirt, the same clothes with which they had buried him days before. He entered confused, without saying anything. There was something different in him, that was always so smiling like a playful child. The woman told me that the old woman interrupted her story at that moment and promised to tell her more later since she had to go to buy something to give her son breakfast. Nevertheless, this woman, the neighbor, never realized when she returned, and the days passed and no one saw them leave the house. After a few weeks, the neighbors decided to enter to see if the old men had finally lost their minds, but there was nothing. The neighbor then told what the old woman had told her, and one more neighbor claimed to have heard the noise in the yard that, in a way, coincided with the incredible story of the old woman. No one came back to the house. They didn't even use the old path that went down to the main street anymore. The day they told me this, we returned to my father's friend's house, and shortly after, we were able to recover and rent a house again. Even today, I want to hear the voice I imagined in the man who was the remainder of death when they told me that story, as if he now wanders confused in my patio at night. I have never dared to look out the window, and never, under any circumstances, did we pass even close to that house where we dared to enter in the worst moment of our lives.